Thank you for listening to our production of Talking Beyond Trauma. This discussion is made available by the South-Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, under a cooperative agreement funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. The MHTTC's goal is to provide free training, present best practices, and to provide ongoing support and consultation to professionals that serve individuals with mental health challenges. The South-Southwest MHTTC is a project of the Texas Institute for Excellence in Mental Health, housed at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Austin. The South-Southwest region, also known as Region 6, covers the states of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arkansas, Louisiana, and our tribal communities. The South-Southwest MHTTC is a part of a nationwide network of providers. The MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, recovery-oriented language in all programs, products, and activities. Today's presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network. The opinions expressed in this presentation are the views of our speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. If you'd like more information about this and other MHTTC products in the South-Southwest region, you can find a link in the episode description. This session was pre-recorded.
Welcome back to Talking Beyond Trauma. I'm Mordecai Dixon. I made promises the last time I spoke to you, promises I don't want to break. I promised you a lot of content because we had so much great content that came out of our first sessions with Dr. Jacob Hom. You remember him. He's been talking to us now for about 2 hours or so about trauma, its impact on our bodies, impact on our organizations and our leadership. And we're going to continue that conversation today. This time we're going to talk a little bit about recovery. What happens after bad things happen? What do we do with all of those experiences, and how do they influence our next steps? As leaders, as well as individuals, this is stuff that we may need to know so that we can get better. Better at our practice, better at our craft, better at being human. Glad you tuned in. Welcome back to Talking Beyond Trauma. What is recovery? What are we talking about here when we're talking about healing from these struggles?
My answer is changing as I get older. I'm moving more and more away from science and from what's been taught to more of a very simple idea about recovery is all about becoming a whole person again. And like what you said, like there's the integration of the survival brain and this other brain that's really hard to define. Nowadays, I've just been calling it the present brain, but that just doesn't sound good. So what is recovery really about? It's about experiencing the vicissitudes of life fully without adding undue suffering on top of the ups and downs of life, to have an open heart so that it breaks and sings when it's appropriate to, and it can resonate with another person's experiences, and to still be able to keep your heart open no matter how much fear tries to shut it down. It's really all about staying heart-led for me. Heart-led. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's such a vague answer. It'll become more clear once we start talking about technique or details or specifics.
And I think that it's clear. I think that it's difficult. What I'm hearing is to be whole. Like, I think of the challenges that people have just from a place, let's use historical traumas, for example. In our first session, we talked about the experiences of prior wars, the experiences of just willful and almost inhumane treatment of other humans and stuff that they have to live with now as a result. And then we say in the same breath that this is about becoming whole, and then opening that heart and allowing that heart to kind of lead out in all things, in all areas throughout the lifespan. It's almost a greater challenge for the younger person who has experienced trauma versus the person who's been wrestling or battling with something for a better part of their life, not knowing, not being open to those experiences you discussed, or understanding the need to open themselves up because their fear response is telling them, keep yourself safe from opening yourself up. So in some regards, it's counterintuitive to say you'll get well as soon as you let go of your fear.
But I'm not suggesting that people let go of their fear.
Okay.
There's a place for fighting, and there's a place for striving and trying to change the world and not accept things as they are. There has to also be a state of surrender and openness and serenity. It's the capacity for both, and being able to do that moment to moment, knowing when to fight, knowing when to surrender, and not surrender as in like lose, surrender as in like, yeah, in the more metaphysical way, I think.
Being present. It's
Yeah.
a different kind of presence. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine in your practice, someone has a facilitator in the person of you or the person providing service that gets them to a place of that surrender. The aha moment, the breakthrough, whatever we want, whatever language we want to assign to that. What does that look like? What is that moment like when you see it, when you feel it, when you know that this person is completely ready to begin their recovery journey?
Well, as soon as you were saying that, the image that came to mind was of a newborn resting in the arms of its parent. There's this sense of safety and regulation that happens in that, and a union with the other. I always think that recovery has to happen at every level of who you are, every developmental stage of who you are too. And so as you're recovering, I personally think that there has to be a sense inside a person where they can conjure that sense of newborn safety in the arms of their parent. I'm trying to get at a feeling more than an idea. Because you said that people need someone else to help you recover. And the first thing I thought was, can you be held in love? And we need to be held in love to be able to overcome the strictures that fear puts us in.
I like that. There's a vulnerability that's involved in it. But to go back through the developmental stages, it's almost like you have to resolve a lot of the past hurts, no matter when they occurred. And that is childlike in a lot of ways. It's surrendering completely. Children have that capacity, oddly enough, and then their adult counterparts not so much. We're a lot more rigid in that place.
Yeah, I've been mulling over the word adulterated, to become adulterated.
Okay.
And I think it's in part to put on the shackles of fear and strife and striving, to know that life is toil and effort. But the goal of life is to do the work of living through the strife and the striving, but to somehow reclaim the serenity and surrender of innocence, that you're held in love, that your needs are met.
Even if that love is not external, I'm talking about an individual loving themselves prior to anybody else having that role.
Yeah, it's all virtuous cycles. And a lot of the people that I work with, they fight me on this because they never experienced love from the outside. And so it seems like an impossible task to learn to love themselves. And it feels actually like it's a mockery of life. To learn to love yourself means that no one's coming to love you. So you only get this consolation prize of loving yourself.
Okay.
So it's a really weird thing to be able to fully experience self-love, which then has a virtuous ripple effect on how people receive you. And it's really hard for people to take that first step. I don't know. They're mutually amplifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
I think you are. I don't think that any of the stuff we're talking about is so easy that you can just make a statement of it. I think we've done a really good job of telling folks on this particular series that we're not going to make quick statements and buzzwords and things. I think we get caught up in what we're talking about. So I'm appreciating the fact that this is difficult to make sense out of. I think when we're providing services, we're looking for something concrete. We're looking for a finish line, if you will. And then we kind of pat ourselves on the back that, hey, this person's resilient, or hey, this person's recovered, or based on what? And I think that there's a lot of gray in this. And you're working with it day in and day out, so you know what you see. I trust that. So I don't believe that it's an easy answer. What role does regulation play in it?
Well, let me, if I were to respond to your question, now that I'm imagining someone listening to this and being confused by what I'm saying, if I were to ground it for them, it would be to be quiet, to stop thinking for a second, and to really draw their attention to their own hearts and ask the heart, are you open or are you closed? Does life flow through you or do you block it out?
Mm-hmm.
These are the concrete steps to getting to where I'm talking about. And then when you feel tightness, then you start to explore into the tightness and you understand the pain and the grief that needs to be validated and witnessed.
Even more of the energy necessary than in my other question is this idea of regulating ourselves or using a tool or a tip that helps us get to that open place.
Yeah.
Is that a good place to begin? And if so, how and why?
Okay. So regulation is a very interesting one. People can misuse that word in lots of different ways. The worst way to misuse it is to think that you have to always be calm. It's not like that. For me, I see people who come in and they say, I want to be free of my anxiety. I want to be free of my suffering. I don't want to think about all this bad stuff anymore. I don't want anything bad to happen to me ever again. I want my children to be happy and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I immediately think that they really want to live on Lake Placid, no more rippling of the waves.
Yeah.
And life just isn't like that. Like life is just like as dynamic as the ocean is. And for me, regulation is riding waves and then paddling back out to catch another one. So it's like being the right thing at the right time, having the right feeling, like allowing yourself to be utterly devastated when you lose someone, or when something bad happens, or when the hardest thing to bear is actually shame. When you do something bad and you get caught and you're just like, you can't stand yourself. You're like one step above death when you experience that level of shame. And to be able to tolerate that level of pain and to let that pain work through you to help purify you and improve your soul. I think that's what I mean. That's what I think of as regulation. People think regulation means that you're somehow being able to tolerate things and survive them. But I think you allow everything to destroy you over and over again. You feel everything to the fullest. And when you do that, then the next moment is completely free to be whatever it needs to be next. And that way you're just part of the world. You're part of the flow of life. There's no fighting it.
What have we been taught that leads us to believe that this is a quick fix? there's got to be a pattern. You spoke about individuals kind of wanting the Lake Placid experience.
Yeah.
Is that what we've been socialized to? Is that, where do we get that? Why is that so pervasive in our society, in your opinion?
I'm glad you said it's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The first things that come to mind are that all Western movies end with a happily ever after. That seems like, and marriages are supposed to be this happily ever after. And if you look at Eastern movies, a lot of them end with like violent, sobering things. And so I'm more used to seeing like movies that end with like tragedy and sadness. And I remember listening to Joseph Campbell way back in the day, and he was talking about how Western religions as well have this notion that it's good versus evil, and the whole goal of life is to kind of renounce evil and to keep moving towards good. And Eastern religions are more like, no, good and evil exist in all of us all the time, and it's about like accepting our complexity. So it's like deeply rooted in our culture, I think, in the Western culture, to be fighting ourselves, to be dividing ourselves up.
I asked the question because there's a growing body of information, and a lot of folks are starting to put forth. There's always been the self-help world. I'll stay away from that for the benefits of this program. I think that's a whole session unto itself. But there is a growing body of research-based work that says we should be more compassionate to ourselves. We haven't really learned, amidst all the stuff that you mentioned, how to just affirm ourselves, to spend that time in openness, whether that's the parent who doesn't really feel like a great parent right now. They're not walking around with the weight of having all the right answers at all the time when, they have children that are wrecking the house right now or not behaving per expectations and that kind of stuff. I see self-compassion, the talk of using personal tools, drawing on one's own mindfulness, those activities as ways to regulate and not necessarily fix the circumstance. Am I thinking about that incorrectly?
But how are you defining regulate here?
Not much different than you finding a way to be mindful, to be open to the realities of what's happening to you in the moment, to be willing to embrace that it's not perfect, that not all things end well, that you're not a horrible parent because you're acting out children right now. Whatever it is that's causing that stress reaction could be born in a traumatic experience.
Oh, whoa, that's a different question. Let me stay with the first one. If you're a parent who's struggling with parenting and feeling like you're a bad parent, for me, it would be to sink into that. If you feel like you're doing something wrong, go read a book. Go, like, if you're in the state of striving and suffering, suffer as deeply as you need to, strive as deeply as you need to change that, and really let it sink in that you're doing a bad job, but not to crush yourself, but to really like motivate you to change, because those emotions are trying to signal something to you that you can use constructively or you can use to beat yourself up. And then when you said that thing about, is trauma somehow lurking in the backdrop? And for an example like that, I think that trauma you're right, it can amplify the bad feelings. Like, I'm a horrible person. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And it can make it harder to regulate yourself because trauma lives subconsciously in our bodies. And so without understanding why, we'll just be way more reactive. And in that way, regulation I'm using in the typical way that scientists use, like when we're overreactive to stimuli. But for me, I think that the way to get properly regulated is to fully feel everything, not adding extra stuff on top of that, because it's already hard enough. Like, feeling like a bad parent is really hard. It's painful. But then to beat yourself up, to have flashbacks of being abused, all that other stuff just adds way more than necessary. And you have to have compassion for those triggers and those flashbacks as well. The thing that makes trauma persist is our avoidance of feelings. And so I'd rather that people learn to suffer and to be in pain and to feel like bad parents and to really be loving towards yourself, even in the midst of that. And then slowly, like, you can see, oh yeah, this is the part that's related to me being a bad parent. This is the part that's related to my trauma. And then you gently hold and hug that part of you. And then you say, let's go figure out how to do this better. Let's promise ourselves not to like perpetuate this pain and like pass it down to our children. But it has to start from this state of compassion.
Usually I'm not completely at a loss of words, but I am as it pertains to this, not because of what you're saying. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I think this is a bear for people to understand.
Yes.
I mean, leaning into suffering. Yeah, most folks don't like that one.
I know.
Owning and opening yourself up to these horrible experiences that happen to you in your life. Yeah.
How people misunderstand it is that they think that I'm suggesting that they just like feel horrible pain and sit in torture in the
Right.
pain.
Right.
And what I'm trying to say is while you're feeling pain, you bear witness to it. You have a little distance from it so that you can cultivate compassion towards yourself as you're experiencing pain. And you surrender to it. Like I have this friend who said this beautiful thing where he said, like, I don't process my grief. So I'm gonna like adapt what he's saying. I don't process suffering. I don't metabolize it. The suffering metabolizes me. It's the other way around. And you surrender to this process of suffering and grief and pain or whatever. And if you learn to have compassion and love in the midst of this thing, an incredible thing comes from this. The metaphor that I always think of it, and I'm thinking about it now as I'm saying this, is that is actually delivery and birth, because it's a life-threatening process, and it's like overwhelmingly painful. And yet, from one of the most painful things that can happen, a life is born, something that we all fall in love with. And for me, it's this weird metaphor that the universe put into our lives. Like it's saying, this is what life is going to be like for you. You have to suffer and suffer. And if you do it well with this anchor or this North Star of love and compassion, then something else will be born anew from this.
It's definitely insightful. Recovery can take a lifetime, and for some individuals, a matter of months. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience seeing both?
People can experience a lightening of their pain suddenly. In like one session, I can get people to say, like, I don't know why, but I feel a lot better. It doesn't mean that the work is done.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you finish one bit of work, there's always more work to do. And I would even extend what you said. It's not just a lifetime, it's actually for generations that we are healing trauma over generations. And my job is only to like move the goal post, like get another first down, and then let my children try to get another first down against trauma and suffering.
I appreciate that. That happens in so many communities. And again, we've seen, I see it in my own community, where families are just doing everything in their power to make sure that this is what happened. You know, these are the traumas. Here's the ugly. Let's talk about it openly. This is what we do to make sure that we counter it. This is how you stay ahead. I don't know that we always use the embrace the suffering model that I just heard. But you're right. If we're not paying attention to historical experiences, we're going to pass those experiences down. And our children watch us model the way that we're handling this. And so it impacts anybody that we care about that's in our circle. Let's talk about this from a place of all of these individuals. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that we've talked about, with the exception of the children, that they went to work. These are folks who have to, at some point, in order to survive in this society anyway, they're going to have to be gainfully employed at some point, which means they're taking their recovery stories to work with them daily. Some of them are people that work in our business. They're human servants. They're folks who actually work to help others heal while also healing themselves at the same time. That's a huge challenge to a workforce, to an individual, and to the person who's responsible for providing support, care, concern, leadership to that individual. How do we create spaces at work, especially human service work, for the recovering workforce, assuming we all are recovering in some form or fashion from some experience in our lives?
The recovering workforce, I like that. Even to just name it the way you did would be a profound shift, because I've seen institutions, fields where that's not acknowledged. It's always like, now you're on the other side. Now you're one of the people who are supposed to help. So there's no room for you to be weak.
Yeah.
You have to have all your ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, then we can punish you because you're like healthy. You don't deserve compassion. You have a job to do. And there are lives on the line. So you better get your act.
Yeah, get your head right.
Yeah.
Can we create those spaces? Are people successful in your experience trying to create those spaces? And what do they look like when they at least make the attempt?
Oh boy, that's leaders have to be in a clear, authentic place in their own recovery, humble in the fact that they're still on their own path. I'm just thinking that so much of what happens is that the responsibility that leaders have to bear makes it so much easier for their egos to get involved, or not egos in the classic sense, but in the sense that they feel threatened, that they're at risk somehow if things don't go right.
Right.
And it just seems unfair all from the get-go to put leaders in that like black and white position.
I agree. Having been one, I think it's a challenge if you only had, let's say, 10 human resources. Your human capital and the extension of the work that you do may impact hundreds of people, but you're only doing it with 10. I have a colleague who's doing it with 30. How do I create the space where I don't feel guilt, where I don't feel like I've shamed myself or my team or even my organization because I didn't create space to optimize this individual's knowledge, skill, and ability, which is the reason I brought them here in the first place? And from what I'm hearing, if I'm not clear as the leader that I have a recovery path of my own, I am probably less likely, just through avoidance, to create the space for the 10 or the 30. Doesn't matter how many staff you have, you won't create that space. So it's not just a numbers game. Smaller leader, smaller number of incumbents, more opportunity to create this space. Whereas the person who has more staff can't do it because it's just a numbers game. Sounds from what you're saying that this is more conceptual, organizationally, from the governance on down, that folks have to embrace that everyone in this organization is on a recovery path. And that's going to influence the way that we create spaces for their healing.
I'm stuck on the use of the word space. For me, I keep wanting to replace it with the word awareness, naming. And I think what I mean by that is that if I led that team of 10, then every day I would have to say and acknowledge with the team that the deck is stacked against us. We're set up to do an impossible thing. We're going to fail. And we're going to have to work 3 times harder to keep up. And this is what it's going to do to us. It's going to make us exhausted. It's going to make us bitter. It's going to make us fight with each other. So you just name everything as it's happening. And see, I think that that's what space is. When people usually think about making space, it's actually to stop action so that you can reflect on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm thinking that sometimes the best thing you can do is just to make sense of what's going on as you still have to act.
Okay.
If that's all that can be done. And then I have this faith in our awareness to say, this is too much. I need a break. The more awareness you cultivate, the more the right action becomes apparent. And then you act. Like there's still need to protest. There's still need to say this isn't right. This is an impossible thing. You still have to like say you're destroying us. We're burnt out.
Mm.
But it has to come from clear-sighted awareness.
And not just anger.
Yes, not reactive anger.
Mm-hmm.
There can be justified outrage from a centered place that's different from reactive anger that kind of wants to destroy and create an us versus them.
Right. I appreciate that piece. I'm definitely aligned with that in my thoughts. I want to take it a step further because I'm also a person that believes that you can create a culture that fosters that awareness, that encourages that awareness. But it's a parallel process, meaning everybody in this organization, from people who don't even do the work at the board level potentially to the person who opens the door and mops our floors or takes care of us and makes sure our facilities are safe, that they all understand that we appreciate that part of their experience that they are going through. As you said, that moment to moment challenge of doing hard work while also doing personal hard work. I mean, we're all doing the work of getting well. At the same time, we're trying to do the work of helping other people get well.
Yeah, I was just imagining being in that. It would be very hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant uphill battle.
Yes. And yet all of our well-being is attached to it. And I think about the outcomes for our families, for the people that we service, the people that children and their mental health. You mentioned that our job is to kind of get at it, bring our full selves, professionally licensed, whatever, to the table so that we can do a particular service. And then what I'm always stuck with is there's no possible way to do it effectively if in fact we're not healing along the way.
Oh.
So somebody has to create a space, call it what you want to call it, a space, a naming convention, something that is predictable, authentic, has some degree of reliability attached to it, so that there's a sustained norm or culture that says healing is also taking place for you.
Agreed. Yeah. Consistency, reliability, those are all hallmarks of safety.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind doesn't have to work to predict what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
And as you were speaking, I was having this image of the person who's striving too hard.
Mm.
And like there's a whip to do better.
Mm-hmm. Say that.
I suddenly imagine that our unintegrated parts are driving us. The non-integrated, the unwhole person. So like the person who has to be perfect, the person who can't make mistakes. Like there's all these ways in which our most virtuous drives can be hijacked by disintegrated parts that are. It's not a healthy centered act.
I'm going to ask you to say more, because the last time we spoke, you said something so powerful. I don't even know if you caught it. You said that managers have to be the calm. because our brains want to just kind of move real fast, and that we, the leaders, actually are the kind of like this guiding force that create the calm. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, that means I have to be able to model it. I have to know that I'm doing
it. I don't know if I live that.
I don't think any of us live it.
Yeah, because
not day in and day out. I mean,
no, I was with a group of supervisees, and they were like, "Yeah, we heard some audio of you doing therapy, and your voice is way more gentle with your patients than you are with us." I go, "I know." When I'm with my patients, I'm in a heart space of just like holding their pain. When I'm with you, my head is activated, and I'm trying to get you better. So I am kind of like pushing you harder than I am trying to hold you. And they're like, they make fun of me, and they still come back for supervision. Because again, it's like being able to embrace the striving moments and the surrender calm moments. So only be calm when it's necessary or when you can, and strive to be centered. But sometimes it's time to go kick ass or fight or just act, get things done.
Yeah, I really am glad that we're saying this out loud. I think leaders can walk away with a lot of shame, thinking in some way that they're not both things at the same time at all times. And it's a virtually impossible thing to do. I embrace the idea of debriefing, coaching, and supervision passionately, but with tens of individuals that worked for me at any given time, and sometimes even hundreds, I wasn't going to be the only person that was providing that space for them. Meeting with you, I expected it to occur, though, and I would get a special kind of fiery if it didn't, because I knew what end game was. I knew what the impact it would be on the employee as well as on the work and as well as on the client. But yeah, you have some leaders that believe if I don't do this myself, it won't get done. And they put an incredible amount of pressure on themselves to be all of the things. And I think they do more harm than good, frankly. I've just not seen it work well. I've always watched that person eventually leave for some reason or the other, or go to do something different. I won't even call it all burnout, because I don't believe it's all burnout. Some of it's just good old fashioned, I'm out of here.
Yeah, not centered, over striving.
Over striving, toxic perfection, whatever we're calling it.
It's really, for me, it's like the example I have is that with some of my patients, I get into like heated arguments with them, and I'm like yelling and screaming at them. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. And they're like, you can't do that. You're a therapist. You're supposed to. It's not something I'm proud of and that I do willfully, but it's something that I forgive myself for sinking into. If it comes from a place of feeling like we are not getting anywhere, there's a huge blockade that I need to get past. And then as soon as the blockade is passed, then my emotions switch to like endearment, affection, calm. And so I know that I'm using it the right way. I'm not clinging to it.
I think there's a parallel for managers and leaders dealing with their employees, right? This, I am so tired of what I am seeing you do or not do.
Exactly.
And I am done with you right now. And then getting beyond that, and sometimes having their own place to work that through so that they can reconsider a way to work with this employee. These employees are usually not going anywhere right away.
And for sometimes that employee who hears that, like, I'm sick of this, they'll actually feel cared for, because they might be burnt out and like lost, unaware anymore. And so it shakes them into presence in a maybe a somewhat terrifying way. But if it's done with, if there's anger with care, then it's actually, it can be productive, as long as it's not meant to hurt and it's gone as soon as it's not needed. And you can allow yourself to flip into the other emotions.
Yeah. So a full range of emotions is still at our disposal. We're, in order to be trauma informed, we don't have to, start breaking into song or creating, unrealistic expectations of ourselves to be these perfect, wonderful, and oddly enough, I think that's one of the bias around employing trauma informed practice, is that authenticity, transparency, even this idea of really bonding and building trust feels too much like anti-managerial, anti-leader, anti-strong, anti-capable in some leaders' estimation. So what would you offer to them that says I can be both?
I actually heard when you were saying anti-strong, anti-leader, I was actually hearing anti-Machiavellian.
Okay.
It's like anti-ego driven.
Yeah.
There's the ideals that I champion do leave you vulnerable to being taken advantage of. If you are operating with like Machiavellian players who will just take advantage of you, then that's the rules by which they're operating. So I feel like that's the better contrast to this approach. You'll be a sucker in some way. Like some corrections officers once called me a hug-a-thug, like a bleeding heart hug-a-thug.
Oh my goodness, what in the world is a hug-a-thug?
Because I'm like a champion of like people most of the people in prisons are people who've suffered horrible traumas, never had a chance. And the COs were just saying that I was a hug-a-thug because of that. That I didn't see that they're just bad people or something like that. This compassion versus self-protection. Machiavellian is self-protection. There are egoically based players who are going to take advantage of you. So this goes back to our first conversation. How do you both be present and compassionate while still watching your back, while still having survival brain activated?
Sure.
And then the other thing that you brought up was, can you be a strong leader? And that's a different energy than Machiavellian. It's not the same as it may overlap with compassionate, but it's really being led by mission and purpose and certainty and confidence. And people can sense that, and they want sometimes to be led when they have doubt. They don't want to make all the hard decisions. And so it's like the person who's willing to put their neck on the line for a vision. And I think that you need all three of those ways of being. You have to be able to operate in all three of those. And it's hard for people to do all three of those.
The challenge I also think exists is that whether it's said out loud or not, there's a lot of bias, if you will, around the path and the road to recovery. You're in therapy, you're broken. You're in jail, you didn't have trauma, you just did bad things. You don't take care of your kid, it's got nothing to do with, whatever, it's the fact that you were using. By the time we start hearing the pathways to recovery, I think recovery has been associated with a lot of social spoils. It's connected to a lot of bad language. It's got a lot of other stuff attached to it.
Okay, so who would say something like that? And as soon as I hear that,
Hug-a-thug to me is a perfect example. It's like,
yeah,
it's a perfect example. It's like that you can't see the person's trauma that all of these people here are traumatized severely. And then we assign a label to it. And that label,
right,
that person's recovery pathway.
Exactly. And this is what I'm talking about. The person who might think like that is in a state of fear. They're operating from survival brain.
And only.
Yes. You're in survival brain when you are adamant about certain labels. You have judgments about things. You have a clear sense of right and wrong, but it's really black and white and extreme. There's no room for complexity.
Gotcha.
And so if someone's saying things like that, then I get super curious about what happened or what are you experiencing underneath this need to be in survival brain right now. So I don't even feel like I need to combat or address, respond to directly those kinds of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a signal that someone's in survival brain.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I help them to like move more towards an open-minded, complexly thinking state of mind?
And to that point, because I agree with you, how do we do that? For
Ears
those
and
of
hearts.
us, ears and hearts. Tell me about ears and hearts. I like that idea.
No mouth. No mouth. You can't ever convince someone to not be in. You can't argue your way into clarity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell people that they're wrong, and you can't convince them of anything. As soon as you use your mouth, it feels like a threat.
Mm.
You have to hear what they're saying and let it really, you have to give up your position and keep listening relentlessly until they feel, now you get why I feel so passionately about this, why I'm using such harsh language.
Mm.
And then they soften. They don't feel the need to be in such survival.
Because we created an opportunity for them, if for nothing else, to discuss this. This is also taking place in the context of work. So this doesn't always happen in the context of a workplace. What we're talking about here is incredibly innovative for some organizations.
If it happened in work, ideally we'd be in a setting where we could say like, timeout, survival brain is here.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, again, you're able to name it first and foremost. And your team has bought into the practice of self-reflection, or just reflecting, period, not just on self, but on process.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give it 20 to 40 minutes of uninterrupted listening. And you can't just this is where the art of being a good therapist kicks in, because you have to listen for themes of vulnerability, themes of wounds and injuries, and you just keep reflecting those things that sink the conversation into deeper levels of vulnerability. And you have to quiet your own fears and survival brain activation as it's happening.
Sure. So for the licensed folks amongst us, this resonates. They're willing to explore vulnerabilities. They're formally trained on how to do it. But for some of them, some of the folks that wind up in positions of leadership, management, supervisory, it's all new to them. It's not something that they would do naturally. So how do we get those folks to build that capacity from a practical place without having a license? Because oddly enough, some folks believe the only folks who can do what you just mentioned are the clinicians. They don't see that as their role.
I know. I hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a fast answer for that, because I mull this over. I've been mulling this over for years, because I've been doing consultations for big organizations for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, don't make us into therapists, just make us into better whatever. And I don't know where the line is.
Yeah. What's the better whatever? What's the whatever?
I mean, I feel like what I am is just that I've just been studying how to be human for like 20 years. And that's what makes me a good therapist. So I'm a black belt in humanity,
Mm-hmm.
in my own humanity.
Yeah.
But I'm also open to being wrong about that. And so I keep wanting to hear from people like, where's the line? What feels impossible to do? Or is it just like years of practice that you can't commit to get to this level of listening?
There are a lot of things people are great at. I've never heard anybody say they were extra great, a black belt in this case, in humanity. Imagine if we were all black belts in humanity. There wouldn't be a need for talking beyond trauma. There wouldn't be a need for how do we interact with one another if we were all willing to be that vulnerable to say, well, first of all, I'm not really good at working with other people or interacting with them, but I'm willing. So let's say, for the sake of this program, that we are works in progress. That's how I'm going to close today, looking at my own humanity and the things I could work on and the challenge to become a black belt in humanity. I want to thank you for listening to our production of Talking Beyond Trauma. We appreciate your participation and hope this discussion helps your journey. If you'd like more information about this and other MHTTC products in the South-Southwest region, check out the link in the description. No production of this size and scope is accomplished without a great team. Heartfelt thanks to our guest, Dr. Jacob Hom, for his willingness, insight, and guidance for leaders. The exchange was value-added and impactful. Special thanks to our fantastic colleagues at Make Every Media for producing this series. Thanks to our MHTTC leaders, Jennifer Baran-Prall, Dr. Molly Lopez, Dr. Stacey Manser, for supporting this idea and bringing this product to life. Thanks to Felicia Benson, our colleague at the National Coordinating Office, for her support and technical guidance on the project. Thanks to the MHTTC administrative team, Kendall Jones and Grace Cruse, for web-based support and title design of the series. Special thanks to Glenn Dembowski and Zatara Lumen for administrative support throughout the project. And finally, much appreciation to Scooter Holiday for our theme music. Join me next time as we wrap up our conversation with Dr. Hom on Talking Beyond Trauma. I'm Mordecai Dixon. It's my pleasure to serve. Be well.